All right. I'm kind of like 50-50. This is like the only time I have to shoot videos and come up with the intuitive topics, and at the same time I kind of don't want to, but then I just keep looking at that phone sitting there on the floor, and it's like, okay, let me see if I can make a video. So this one's going to be about spiritual awakening before and after. But there's so much wrapped into this. It's really hard to pinpoint down exactly what needs to be talked about on what creates a before and after of spiritual awakening of your experience, leading into higher dimensional perception, because spiritual awakening, the word, the cue, can really limit you into what can be experienced. So it's very you have to understand that your spiritual awakening actually doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. You have been ascending in awareness and in consciousness, in your conscious awareness, in your higher dimensional perception, ever since you were born, ever since you incarnated into this life. If you are experiencing a spiritual awakening, it was bound to happen, and there is no limitation on to where your expansion and your growth can take you. So that is one thing that's very important to understand, is the reality of everyone's spiritual awakening is that there is no beginning and end. But we can pinpoint specific times where we have developed. And so you may experience different chakras opening up. You may experience different levels of clairvoyance or clairsentience or what have you. You may have paranormal activity, somewhere along your timeline, and they're all just different cues getting you to jump on this train and keep ascending. So, so when I was kind of just sitting here making my coffee, thinking, what has really changed and what am I really thankful for? And so on a physical level, me personally, with my timeline, I suffered really bad nerve damage ever since I was born. It just got worse and worse and worse. And I developed into this obviously wound up person. And it was very obvious to me years before I became aware of spiritual awakening, what all this entails, and all the information started getting channeled, started getting all the confirmations of what is reality and the changing reality. I knew that I was very wound up and didn't really pinpoint why, just sort of kind of blamed myself. But after some years, and then especially after spiritual awakening and after conditioning and meditation, it starts to become very clear that there's actually repairing to do. So I've been repairing my nervous system as best as I can, having permanent conditions with my spine and permanent experiences I'll never be able to unlive ever since I was born. And so a lot of trauma. And so being able to process all that through the integration of the mind and the mind heart coherence, all your past memories and traumas corresponding with your emotions, to clarify them so that they don't affect you in a negative way anymore. You have full control over that energy that manifests itself into your life, into your emotions, into your psyche, into your physical world, including the people that you meet. So that's one thing after spiritual awakening that we're trying to always perfect, is that inside and out, we are trying to clarify what we accept and what we don't accept in our life. So we avoid the repetitive nature of falling in with the wrong people or wrong habits, or treating ourselves, reflecting on ourselves in negative ways that don't reflect our true core value, our true strength and pride in ourselves and what we bring to the table of life. Now, so physically, from my experience, which everybody's experience varies, clarifying the nerve damage and being able to have the tools in order to keep perfecting it and clarifying it and heal myself, both emotionally, mentally, and with my nerves. So you might be able to still obviously see this, and especially in the way I talk and express myself, that I am a bit wound up, and I'm constantly experiencing some extreme form of discomfort or pain, and extreme pain. Now, mostly when I'm by myself, that's when you start to see that I'm in pain all the time, because I have to adjust myself all the time. In fact, maybe I'll give you a little kind of like window. Listen really closely. Now, if you could hear all that, that was like maybe like a dozen pops, just to sort of relieve, stretching and relieving the crookedness and compression of my spine, from the few times that I've damaged it, broken it. Anyways, so nerve damage. So that is a miracle in itself. And then so there's all sorts of miracles. I'm not going to get into them all, but there's all sorts of miracles like that. Things that you would think. That's how I would look at it. In the long run, what you're looking for is concrete proof that miracles do exist, because they do. And if you have problems like this, you can work miracles through them, through your higher dimensional perception, bringing up your higher dimensional perception after spiritual awakening, along the road to ascension. So so there's the speeding up of information, which expands time. Now that's one area. But even more important than that, I don't know why I just mentioned that before this, but but before that, what's more important is clarifying what is fear and what is duality in one's own journey. Because really, what we're trying to do is eliminate any situation or circumstance that we could ever get involved in that would make us afraid or insecure, or not be able to survive in this world. And so how we feel, the theory, when we learn manifestation and we learn how reality really works, is that it works from the inside out. That when we clarify the inside, it changes our reality, and that is very true. So we want to be very common sense when we go through spiritual awakening in what it is that we're afraid of. So some of us experience aggression and violence towards us in our life. We experience violent experiences where we don't know why we're being put in these situations, or where we have an attacker in our life. That can be one piece of the karma in one's energy that develops this life experience that we need to clarify and get away from, because otherwise sometimes we experience this more than just one time in our life. And so those are those Fibonacci sequences of events that we are trying to clarify. And usually it can create a victim mentality, a why me mentality. But when we start actually becoming more aware and proactive with them, we can change them in some very basic common sense ways, but in also some very metaphysical miracle response ways that prevent them from even coming into our life at all. You will not experience this ever, but that comes with exchanges of karma too. One thing I experience is I don't experience much activity, like for like I'll go through these like 7 to 8 years of not having any contact with anybody, and not getting any confirmation in the physical world in that sense. But then all of a sudden it starts to unravel, and all of a sudden my life starts blossoming, and all of a sudden people that weren't there before are there, and it's like, wow, where have you been all my life? And that will last a series of years, and then all of a sudden that will disappear like it's never been there before. This is how reality can dramatically change, and it can make you go insane if you don't recognize the fact that we are involved. Some of us are meant to experience some very extreme shifts in reality in order to get us to understand this true power, to be able to control that. So that's why the old adage goes that the God will not, make you experience more than, I'm paraphrasing, than what you can handle. You won't experience more than you can handle, because everything is set up so that you can reach that point of where you can handle. So if you find yourself experiencing a lot of extreme situations, not understanding why you've survived them, that is where you need to start becoming more aware that you have control over it, and start creating quantum templates. Basically, you are signing off to approvals on what you will consciously accept in your life and what you won't. That is one of the things in manifestation they teach you, is to write everything down in detail, right? Because that means you have more control over the details that actually get manifested in your life. So that's important to do, but you need to be very emotionally involved and consciously you have to consciously correspond with the archetypal value and content with the lessons. So I've spoke on this before, especially in my last video, how the universe is constantly trying to get us to emotionally respond, because it wants clarification on what we're going to accept. And so if we're aware that it is looking for this confirmation from us, we can create these templates. Or if we need the assistant of writing it all down, go ahead and write it down. But this is what I mean by creating templates. We need to give approval to what we're willing to accept in the universe. And so this kind of gets into like prayer. Prayer can have like two avenues. One is where it plays on our emotions in a negative way, where we're desperate. And then the other is where it plays on our emotions in a positive way, where we have faith and trust, where we don't need to worry about fear response. So how fear becomes relevant in our higher dimensional perception, our HDP, is important to the longevity of our ascension and the longevity of our reverse aging, or our ability to work with theurgy, clarifying our energy, clarifying our body, which gets into my personal opinion, and you can disagree with me if you'd like to, but I feel that the disagreement would be from a fear, or a negative emotional response. But I feel that taking care of the body in its purity, which means detoxing and maintaining a substantial weight, not too low, not too much, is part of spiritual awakening. Your body should go through this transformation in a true spiritual awakening, because I feel that if you do not clarify the body in that way, if we're practical about it, back in the day, back in ancient man, when ancient man was more in tune with his spiritual self, they weren't, they were mostly, very, very undernourished people, constantly going through detoxification symptoms, which is something people experience less these days because we're so well nourished and overfed. And you can disagree with me, and it could be just a gentle way of saying, fat people fat people are not are not spiritually awakened. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. Of course not. That's preposterous. But to clarify the cells means to also clarify the fat cells, and I understand this through experience, through learning detoxification techniques, is that's what you're doing when you're detoxifying. All the toxins and all the negativity remain in the fat cells, which creates this loop of repetition. It's just the way life works, and it interprets that into our body. So taking care of the body and maintaining a standard weight for your height and age and whatnot, obviously consult a physician, that is optimum to a spiritual awakening. So that is the before and after. So in my case, I've always been super thin and not being able to be in control. But after spiritual awakening is when I started stabilizing and realizing the weight that I'm supposed to maintain. I don't gain much more, but I'm also not losing a lot. all the time. And so if you check back in my videos all the way back to the beginning, you'll see that I was really, really thin, and I was having a hard time keeping the weight up. And my nervous system was probably a lot more degenerative. But I've done a lot of healing in those. Those are just examples. So fear is huge. The physical condition, of your body, applies to the quality of your spiritual awakening and your ascension progress, and your ability to adapt to the quickening. And now, so information coming in, so information and time are essential to your awareness expanding. So this is why it's important to accept the archetypal world and to have faith in yourself and in your progress, and to be very in tune with your emotions. Hang on a second. I'm getting more information about empath. Oh man, just a lot of information's coming in. But that's the game. So you have to learn how to stabilize that. And so stabilizing the flow of information is probably done best through whatever kind of ritual you want to adapt in your spirituality, whether or not that's working with crystals, meditation, candle work. There's an infinite amount of avenues in order to harness this archetypal information that the universe is constantly trying to feed into your consciousness, depending on how open you are. And if you're just a straight up open vessel doing the right thing, there's going to be a lot of information, but you're also going to be able to balance it out. It's just like Superman at first, when he can't, adjust to the planet, and he's hearing all this nonsense, and he's seeing all this not too much, information. It's the same exact thing, but on a more grounded, humanized. It's not superpowers in the movie sense, but it is superpowers. In a lot of information coming in, especially when the universe understands, when you are corresponding with the universe, and it understands and you understand that is a willingness to participate. Now that's where it gets into free will, because you can be a superhero if you're willing to do so, and if you're willing to ground yourself in understanding what a superhero actually is. The archetype of the hero's journey, or the superhero, is not always a great. It's not an awesome road. It is not. There's a lot, because if you're willing to participate in all the miracles of life, that means you're willing to participate in all the negativity in life that you can experience, and you have to awaken from all that negativity to be able to harness your reality. So this is why some people seem like they're on a very light and white spiritual journey, and then some are on a very dark and just black spiritual journey, and then there's the middle road. But it expresses itself in what we'll perceive it that way. It's all about your experience, how you're perceiving that energy. Duality exists for this reason, for us to be able to harness its different energies in our coherency and in our awareness of them, so that we can create those templates for the perfect life, so that we know what the perfect life is. But you can't know what that actually is in your experience unless you experience the opposite of that. So you will experience a lot of negativity and things that you wish you can be free of. But that is because you're creating these grand templates. The more intense it is, if it is just small learning lessons, then you'll just be boom, 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 and you'll never see them again in your life. That's how you change your reality. It all has to seep in, and you have to be able to manage it with the mind-heart coherence, and see it coming with that third eye. Have the ambition with your lower chakras to get it done in physical reality. That's what those chakras are for, is the ambition to physically get it done, and also metaphysically get it done. So that is, those are the top, the top changes. fear being the number one. Life, the your awareness looking, peering through the veils of a duality, to have a non-dualist perspective on life. It's the only way to advance in your abilities. Because if you constantly think that your limitations don't serve a purpose, um, and you can't understand how at the same time you're working from a limitless psyche, okay, in order to change your world physically in a limitless way, right? To bring abundance in, that is the purpose. What fear and duality is trying to show you, so you can harness that and create quantum templates to change that. And like I said, yeah, faith, however that interprets into your story, is very relevant, because that is going to elevate you also. That is going to get you out of the pit, and help you adapt to the Christ template and understand what that is in raising you all, just like it says in the Bible, how this is getting into archetypes, and so we can use these archetypes. So how Jesus descended down into hell briefly before ascending back up, right? That is a archetype explaining the template that we have inside us, and connecting our chakras all the way from limitless sub reality to limitless, I don't know, higher potential, higher reality, or heaven, the heaven state of mind. Connecting from Malkuth all the way up to Kether, and having that Christ template to be able to understand and resonate with all those energies coming into Tiferet, so that we can harness all that information. It can be very confusing, but so I guess the last thing to consider is the before and after spiritual awakening, is your comprehension of what an empath actually is. Because there is because I talked about duality, there's a difference between an empath and a simp, a sympathizer, someone who works through sympathy, who's basically taking their lower emotions and conjuring up excuses to feel from a certain perspective. Now, an empath understands that the correspondence with their emotions serves greater value, but that does not interpret into action and intention. So the empath knows when to act with intention. So it does not let the emotions drive the action and intention, because that defeats the purpose. See, if we're only acting from a sadness, a negative, a pity, a sympathy, that is the difference in before and after spiritual awakening. So we have to kind of understand what we're trying to do. Ultimately, we're trying to reprogram ourselves. That's more terminology that they use out there in the spiritual awakening community, is we're trying to reprogram ourselves. So, but in doing so, we have to understand what kind of things are perpetuating programs and canceling them out. So you notice how my thumbnails always seem to suck. And I leave it that way because I let YouTube do that, because it's not going to give you, like, I could go on AI and make some kind of crazy thumbnail and learn how to attach it to my my content, but it's only going to add to that click value, and that click value is really what's killing you. And if you found it hard to find this content, that probably served a purpose, because it needs to be hidden from the less conscious, from the easily disturbed, I don't go from this because it's not giving me the dopamine I need, or whatever, the hit that I need chemically in my brain. Someone who doesn't necessarily understand their own chemistry, who relies on the exterior world to stimulate them and move them. See, these are the things that we're trying to reprogram, which is why I simply put out my content as dumb as it might seem sometimes. I could put in edits. I could make myself look better. I could learn, to stop making all those crazy facial expressions that YouTube always puts, in my thumbnails. I could do a lot of things, but really none of that is going against the grain. And I want to go against the grain in an abrasive way that makes your consciousness stop abruptly and go, holy crap, I have been falling victim to these programs. That's the difference between the before and after. The mind intuitively, instinctively, and without fail constantly reminds you, the psyche constantly reminds you analytically in the forefront of your mind of those, oh, that's a program, that's a program, that's a program, that's a program, that's a program. And you learn to create these templates that focus all this energy in so that it clarifies with your emotions. This is important with the stillness and silence, and this is what I'm going to get into now, is that we want to be able to tell the energy what is us and what is not us. It's like, okay, no, that's not me. Don't bring that around again, universe. But it's all in the way you respond. And so then you notice how other unawakened people, right? Or we'll just do that because nobody is truly unawakened. They will respond with that bothers my emotions, and I will get angry or I will get sad, and in correspondence with the world around them and in the people around them. My mom was a very reactive person, fully asleep, and she could not help but go out into public and find an excuse to cry and react about something. It was very hard to deal with. But I wouldn't have been able to see that the way it is and work it out in my programming to be able to reverse that and change my world and see how that changes reality once you get rid of it, before and after spiritual awakening. So these are the things that we're trying to perfect. And you can make that about almost anything. You can make it any habit or emotional response or thing that you think you need to cling to. Put that in its place, and there you go. Those are the programs we're trying to wake up from. So stillness and silence. Stillness and silence is incredibly important, and we find out the true value after spiritual awakening. Because, like, you hear the noise in the background, because we might be struggling to find silence in our life, and we may not be awakened yet to that point where we realize no sound nor vibration or continuous vibration, however that resonates with you, of light, spectrum, or emotion and sound, anything that vibrates into existence, everything's perpetual and it never ends, right? So sound is like an archetype, because when we talk about this consciously, because sound, no matter what, never seems to go away unless you harness your ability to eliminate sound. Like you even hear my refrigerator going on in the background. Now I can create somewhat of, if I had the resources, I could create an environment to soundproof, or if I think that is actually a relevant reality or something I actually need to fix, keep in mind, like I just said, I have no resources. But if I create templates instead, all of a sudden for my consciousness, it's not a problem, and I can talk right through it. Otherwise, it'd be truly distracting, right? So that's where we're trying to get up, because you've seen me in my videos. If you've watched my videos in the past, you've seen where I've paused and stopped to acknowledge the fact that something is distracting and how that serves a purpose. So that's the purpose for recognizing that, because we're constantly trying to elevate our awareness past that point of ADHD where it's like, okay, I can't focus because something is distracting me. You can get the message the universe is constantly trying to channel through the noise. That is what the true stillness and silence is, along with the ability to experience true stillness and silence with almost no activity, and you can totally be aware and observant of the stillness and silence. It's not something I can actually describe to you. It's something that would make a very short book. In fact, Eckhart Tolle wrote a very short book about stillness and silence. It was literally like 20 pages long. And he literally said that all you have to do is read the first paragraphs, and if you understand it, you don't need to read the rest of the book. Put it down and start getting to it. That's how you can explain what stillness and silence is. But the way I like to describe it is it's the human experience version of the television when it has those lines, and because of its frequency, the speed of its frequency, you see those lines in those old-fashioned televisions, or when you look, anyways, you see those lines going up and down. Well, the faster you're able to see those lines means that's the speed of the frequency, right? Well, that is something you can actually experience with your reality and your brain activity, clicking on and off, clicking on and off. You start to pick up this repetition, and you realize that there is a moment between these lines of repetition in the human brain, in the psyche, where there is a stillness in silence between the giving and receiving frequency. And so your mind will start to create this pattern, and you can even make a visual of it. You can even hear it, and you can experience it, and you can grasp that one right between the lines. That no one can explain how this is done or how you can experience. You have to be able to do this. Read Eckhart Tolle's book, and I don't know, watch some YouTube videos and listen to this explanation. But if you can grasp that between the lines, that stillness and silence, you can personify it and reflect it off of yourself to where that is what you're experiencing. You're just experiencing that. And so that is the level we're trying to get up in both our ability to focus and meditate, curing our attention deficit disorder, and to be able to receive more information. The stillness and silence has a quantum value to where you can broaden that spectrum of the negative and positive between the lines. And this is what we would experience. See, this is why in the past they thought that it was not possible, but this is where you can experience what they would refer to as Dath, D-A, A-T-H, Dath, which is the invisible chakra. It's right in front or behind the whatever you want to. It's the invisible chakra. It's behind the throat, or it's somewhere. It's not the throat chakra, but it's somewhere here. But it's the invisible one, and it's the only true expression of truth, which is the stillness in silence, and it's the realm in which only can be found in the abyss, which can't be explained, nor be in. So this is like the reverse of it, because they used to say it can't be experienced, but once you experience it, you can't be explained. So it doesn't really matter anyways. But maybe let me know down in the comments if you understand what I'm talking about. So there is a realm that we call the abyss, which we are trying to raise our level of awareness to an extreme to where we can experience it, and it's called Dath. Anyways, whether you believe it or not. Anyway, so that is just one of the many realms between realms, in my opinion. It's just something you don't want to think too hard on, obviously, because we're reaching Dath, you're reaching for the stillness and silence. So you're trying not to reach for anything at all. So when we raise our higher dimensional awareness, higher dimensional perception, this becomes like reflex, and it corresponds with our ability to manifest things into physical reality, or at least to perceive things manifesting into physical reality, into those higher realms. So stillness in silence is incredibly important for all those reasons, and it is the apex of the human experience. To be able to experience all this noise and a perfect reality at the same time that no one can explain to you how to experience. Okay, so that's where we're trying to go. Is there any higher than that? Man, what have I even been talking about? Before and after spiritual awakening. Yeah. Well, it's starting to get noisier, and I think that is maybe the best I can do for the best part one, of before and after spiritual awakening. You get to hear the train in the background. Maybe I am done. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Give me a thumbs up if you relate with this, and subscribe if you're not, and I will catch you later. My name's Ryan. This is the Watcher's Alchemy.